Welcome and hello. I am Brigitte Stab, and I'm here today with Jane Peterson, talking about her part in the origin story. Jane, would you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself so people know who you are before we get into the questions?
Sure. So I'm Jane Peterson, as you said. I'm the founder of the Human Systems Institute. I founded that thing in 1999 to support it. Founded it for constellation work to support the field when I first came across constellation work. And our first trainer was Sinead Victoria Schnabel, actually.
With who?
Sinead Victoria Schnabel. She came in
right
for us. So I've had that little institute since then. Quite by accident, 2001, I ended up meeting Valiantly in Salt Lake City, and he invited me to Hong Kong. And I had no idea that I was going to spend about 16 years on the road after that.
Right.
Going a lot to Asia and all these different places and teaching. So I didn't actually plan any of this. It sort of happened. So that's in 2015 was my last year on the road. I retired to a small farm, semi-retired, to a small farm here in Aurora, Oregon, out near Portland.
And what have you been doing up to finding constellation work
well, I started my first career was my parents gave me a choice. I excelled in the arts, and my parents gave me a choice of business or science that they would help me in college. And I was interested enough in science that I went that route. And so my first career was as an engineer, not exactly a good engineer, but good enough. And I had my midlife crisis early. I left. I went into the fine arts finally for a while, and then I ended up at Fielding in graduate school for systems work. And I'd found NLP, and I'd done a lot of my own healing in that period of time. So I'm not sure. Are you there, Brigitte? Just like
yeah, I'm there. Okay. I just needed to make the picture a little bit brighter.
Yeah, that helps.
Mine anyway.
Yeah. So he's kind of walking backwards into this one. You know, I met Bert in person in 1998 and was absolutely gobsmacked. I had no idea what had just happened.
Was that in Seattle? That workshop in Seattle?
No, it was in Salt Lake City.
Oh,
again.
okay.
This was a bigger point. I had a friend at the time. I was taking a health certification there in advanced training, and that's where I met Valiantly. This is also where I found out about Bert. And I had a friend who was in Seattle, someone who lived there. And I called her up and I said, well, I can't afford to go back to Salt Lake City again. I just was there, but I know you'd be interested in this. And so she talked me into going. She said, I'll help you, we'll share a room. We'll both get there. And I found out the reason she wanted to go was because she was sweet on a guy. It had nothing to do with Bert Hellinger. But you just got me in the room. That's where I met Bert, and I was both aghast, actually, as a woman of my generation, and the feminist thing, and Bert was very German and patriarchal, and I was kind of aghast and horrified at the same time. I was absolutely fascinated. I had to know more. And this same friend in Seattle called me about a week later after we got home and said, you won't believe it, there's a woman here from Germany doing this. And that was Sinead. So I packed my bags again and went, and that's how I met Sinead. And so after that, I was hooked. I haven't stopped.
Yeah, that's that is actually one of the questions that we have here. I mean, the first one is, what drew you personally into this work and your passion? You were just
I think first it was my own healing, like it is for everyone.
Yeah, right.
I did a lot of work for the first few years I was involved. And the other thing I think that really grabbed me about the work was I saw how effective it was. It always amazes me. Bert just would say, and choose someone to represent yourself. That's like 6 months of therapy right there. Like there's looking at you, right? Things like that in the work that are so effective at helping people change. That I was fascinated.
Right.
Had to try.
And why are constellations a passion for you? Because of that healing? Is there any other aspect that you like so much about it?
Well, I think it's changed for me over the years. And for me, um, I find the constellation work is like this amazing adaptable canvas on which many different kinds of stories and different methods can be, painted. So I feel like I've been so gifted. I've had so many just amazing teachers in my life. When I was in graduate school, I met Barnett Pierce, who's a master of human communication. I had met Michael Rinder, who taught me to see groups and understand group dynamics and safety. And I'd worked with Arnie Mindell and process, so I'd had the opportunity to meet the founders in fields. My course of my journey, I guess, my wandering in Americo Yabar. I worked with him for many years in shamanism and energy work. And so I found in constellation a place where I could bring all of those influences together, and then all the new learning we've had about trauma and polyvagal theory and all this kind of place. These things, this is a place where they all support each other and you can be creative. Yeah. For me, I think that's what's enabled me to stay in the work. The very first constellation I did, speaking of efficiency, I came back from seeing Bird and I had a client who'd driven up from, 3 hours to see me for a session, and she had the whole day. And we were stuck. And I said, well, you want to try something? I had no idea what I was doing, right? 32 pieces of paper on the floor. And it took us 3 hours, but it worked. Right?
Yeah.
She got what she needed. And it wasn't even what I knew. It was something different that came out of that work. So I was totally hooked. There's so many different things you could bring to this work and so many different ways you could play that it, I think I get bored easily, and I haven't gotten bored.
Right. Me neither.
Yeah.
It never gets old. It's always fascinating.
Yeah. And surprising. So yeah, I think for me, that's what I would say.
So you were there from such an early time. What can you tell us about the history of constellations in North America from your point of view?
Yeah, I can only really tell you from my little tiny point. I think that for me, what happened was, like I say, I met Sneh, and Sneh did trainings, and she introduced me to Gundar Weber, to Albrecht Marr. That got me to the conference in Germany. So that, and I met Hunter Beaumont there and Colleen. So it was actually through a kind of a loop through Germany that actually brought me, kind of ended up full circle, because I met them and then I was able to bring them here as teachers. For a number of years, we brought people in. And as you know, Gundhard is really kind of, he's the editor of one of the Praxis, one of the big journals there, started a lot of those things. It's very hard to say no to Gundhard. He just has this about him. So when I was at Würzburg in 2003, and there was like 2,500 Germans there, basically. There's a few of the rest of us, right?
I was there too.
Right. And you remember there was this panel, there were 10 of us staring at all these, right? And yeah, I don't know if you listened, Iraq the thing had just started, and the Britain and the US had invaded Iraq, and Judith Hemming was next to me. She leans over next to me as we're sitting on that panel staring at all these people. She says, God, I hope there's no questions. Neither one of us wanted any political questions. So, but and when I was there, Gunnar approached me and he said, he basically had decided that I would do the conference. He kind of just had this little way of working on me. And so we did, it was, that was, I think, the first time for us in the United States where we saw each other face to face.
Right.
And we had the first day where we sort of kicked all the German teachers out so that we could sit down with each other and say, who are you? I've heard about you.
Yeah, that was fun, actually. That was really good, to getting to know part. It was such an intimate conference. That was so good to see other people, to meet other people in the field, and it really set the tone. for working together more. And
Right, to have an identity as, in such a big country, to sort of get our own identity as facilitators.
mhm.
I remember one of the things that came out of that. I don't know if you remember, in the afternoon we did this, everybody did these small group constellations, and we all came back and said, gosh, we have a lot to learn. You know, gosh, we're not very mature in this yet.
Right,
It's that kind
right.
of realization of how young we were
Mhm.
group in the work,
Yes.
that we still had so much to learn. That was like 2005. So
Uh-huh.
we've been on that journey, and I think it's been fun to see things mature, see
Yeah.
people gain confidence, you know, begin to travel and really start to claim our own place in that whole scene.
Yeah.
So
Well, you inviting all the German facilitators was definitely a huge service, as was the conference. For me, it wasn't that far to go. I didn't have to get in an airplane to go down to Portland and see some of these German facilitators work and learn from them. I mean, I learn best from the field anyway, and then
Right.
everybody has a different approach, right? And you get to see how they do it, and see, you know, if that's something that you would like to incorporate. And yeah,
Right.
that was really, you were so instrumental in getting us educated, and getting us organized, and getting to know each other. That was really, really great. I'm
Yeah.
very thankful.
Oh, thank you. That was quite a leap of faith to do that thing.
So when did you start facilitating, other than the placemats on the floor?
2 pieces of paper. That was actually when I started. I just kind of, you know, Bert said in that, you know, I remember, I'll never forget what he said. And he said this a number of times, but he said the same wind makes many dragons fly, meaning, and he said, don't take my word for any of this, go try it.
Mhm.
You know, kind of out on the outer outpost there in Portland, Oregon. Germany was a long ways away. They couldn't get
Right.
to stop, right? So I did. I just started experimenting and kind of let the field teach me. And then any book or tape I could get my hands on, I would
Right.
wear them out, trying to figure out what they were doing. And then anytime Bert came, I would, you know, be in as many.
Oh yeah. Right.
So, you know, and then, you know, having people come like Gunther and Albrecht, and, you know, that.
Yeah, and Ursula Franke, you hosted her too. I was there for that. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
We had, yeah, I think 3 or 4 people come right off the bat there.
Yeah.
The difference. Yeah. Brigitte, I just lost your sound. I don't hear you. Yeah, I don't hear you. I don't know whether.
Oh, I don't know how that happened. I didn't do that. It's technology. We're just gonna have to be patient with that.
Yeah.
So I know you have trained students. How many years have you been a trainer? When did you start formal trainings?
I started, people started asking me, you know, because I was doing workshops locally, and I just jumped out there and started doing things, which I'm not sure was always the best thing, but I did it, right? And I realized that around 2000, that if I didn't start sharing what I was learning, I would forget the basic steps. I would get to a point where I would just be automatic. I wouldn't be able to explain things. So I had people asking, and I was realizing that, so I just started. I think that first training I did, I call it Constellation Boot Camp. You know, it's like I took everything I knew and I sort of shoved it at these poor students.
What year was that?
That would be 2001 when I started, and I would say they taught me at least as much as I taught them.
Oh yeah,
You know?
right.
I also started traveling, and I just, you know, I felt so green myself. I just had to tell myself I know a little more than they do. I'm just going to stand up there and do what I can do. So yeah, so, you know, I did a lot of work in Asia too over the years. A lot of Americans were time students, but they're in Hong Kong and places like that. I had to get really efficient. So I'm grateful, because all of the places I went, it was expensive for them to bring me.
Right.
And I had to really hone my craft as a trainer. I had to get effective about it, because I would so much, you know, I loved the work so much. I didn't want it to be mishandled or misused.
Yes.
And I had to get really efficient about. And so I'm grateful. I think they taught me so much. All those different, and how to work in different countries, how to work with an interpreter, things that
Mhm.
my bucket list of things I thought I was going to need to learn.
Yeah.
But how to stand up and just keep going when you didn't quite know what was going on, all of those things, because there's nobody else there to do it. So
Mhm.
I think it was kind of a on-the-job training, but I don't think anybody got hurt. And I think, like I invited back, so I guess that I was doing okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it was also different mentality, right? It's so different working in different countries with different mentalities and different histories that affect the personal lives of families.
Right.
So yeah,
Civil War, I learned about, the Cultural
right.
Revolution, I learned about things I would never have
Yeah,
understood.
that's important. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's important to know their history. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. What are some of the main points that you want your students to know or to learn, or what are you trying?
Mhm.
Did you have a focus? What was the most important thing for you to convey to your students, and how did you do that?
Well, I realized fairly early on that, watching the way the Europeans trained, that Americans from the professionals, that we had a different way of training. We have, like formal training. So I'd had training in training, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And so, because some of the early trainings I was the organizer, and I got a lot of complaints from the Americans who wanted something that was a more formal training. So I began to realize that the way that the Europeans were training and the way that the people, at least that I was organizing for, that there was a gap there, and that I could fill that gap. And I also realized that there was, a lot of emphasis on the intuitive, and that I had been gifted with these other teachers, that I knew a lot of the how, like
Mm-hmm.
how do you read a group? How do you create safety? How do you get permission? Like all of these things I had been taught in by other people.
Yeah.
I was able to make explicit things that were, like, how did that person do that? To make it so people who were learning the work had handholds. They had a way to be successful at some of those kinds of things. How do you do inquiry effectively so that you get to the heart of the issue, and you're doing the issue going to have the most impact on your client? So that was one area where I really got interested. And then I went on this long pursuit of the field. Part of my science background was like, okay, what is it? Like, how does it work? How do I know if I'm doing a good job for somebody?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and it kept taking me back to the body. I know you're a fellow body-oriented worker here, and I kept realizing how much I could find if I started to work somatically. If I started, like, I can find your whole constellation in your body. I can find it
Right.
all. So that was the other thing that I really started to emphasize, was to teach people to see what's right under their nose.
Mm-hmm.
That, and to work with the gestures. And I happen to have these folks who are in early childhood, development and trauma, and show me that reps were showing me birth traumas and showing me in their body postures things that I then learned to see and use.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would ask questions that I wouldn't have, I wouldn't had to like hope that I came across it, but that there
Right.
was disciplines that I could draw from that would kind of make it explicit. How do you do this?
Mm-hmm.
So I was always wanting to make sure that I was really doing my clients a service. That I'm offering the best that I can to my clients. So
Yeah.
it's a little different, Bert's really a facilitator-centered practitioner. If you watch him,
Yeah.
much more
Right.
centered
Mm-hmm.
work. So that drove a lot of the way I organized my trainings as well.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, a lot of the German facilitators did that. Dietrich was also facilitator oriented, but not as much as Bert. I did learn a lot. And I always thought that our trainings were very complementary. I actually sent people to you because I don't have that structural gift. So I focus on teaching people to be intuitive, or I mean, we are all intuitive already, right? But how do you get the mind out of the way so that you can actually access all the wisdom in the field? And then and you had that very methodical piece that I said, okay, well, you know, here's something for your left brain also, because you know. So I thought that was always really really nice that you lived so close by, so that
we could support each other, right?
Yeah. All right. So what are some of the gems of wisdom from your work? Is there something that you learned? I'm sure you have.
Yeah, I think we've already touched on it, which is, you know, I remember having a cup of hot chocolate with Gunther one time, and he, you know, is a big German bear of a guy, right? So he kind of reared back. I can tell you from looking at a person's face, you know, who's important to them and their family, whether they were misused, mistreated, or left out. I mean, he just rattled off this list, and I didn't know him very well. So I said, okay, prove it. So he started, and then he described my husband. I actually went and had a number of my students took their pictures and brought him in and said, okay, what do you think? And he was pretty good. If you can get this from your face, what can you get from the whole body?
Right.
Turns out I can find the whole, like I said, the whole constellation just by working with how the clay of the body has been shaped by relationships. So I see when I see a client or I'm watching a rep, I no longer see it as a body. I see that always as like, who is that in relationship to? Whereas the rep system that's shaping what I'm seeing here. Because I know I'm only seeing something that's in response to, you know, and when I start looking for what has to be on the other side of that, you know, how does that show up? So much becomes clear. Amazing. You know, if you start to use the body, even when you're dealing with little objects, if you imagine that those are bodies in space, you know, it's really different if I can touch you than if I can't. Those are lived stories. So it's really gone really down the rabbit hole in terms of understanding what the body is telling us, because it lives in relationships 24/7. You know, so she knows things that our mind does not know, and she's telling them all the time. Right? We just don't see. So being able to see the soma, the living intelligent body being that's always in relationship, and hear what she's saying, hear what's being told. So I guess that would be my, I don't know if that's a gem, but that's something. Well,
it popped right into your head, so it must be something that you've really taken away from the work, and that and you know, as I always find, whatever I learn in the work does not stay there. It becomes part of my life and the way I look at it, and I look at the world. It's just there. It's one big constellation out there, and everything we learn in constellations is applicable everywhere else too. It's all systems. Yes.
Yeah, sure. Systems all the way down. Yeah.
What variations of the work do you prefer personally?
You know, I don't think I have a favorite. I think what I like about constellation work is it's like this palette. So if I need a blind constellation with or without reps, or, you know, the thing I enjoy about the work is the creative space that there is. So if I want to do a little bit chaotic, I just want to throw it out there and see what happens. Let the field show us whatever's, you know, needs to be seen. I can do that. It's the choice of ways of that I really relish about the work. I'm not, you know, not attached to one way. I'll do whatever makes sense in that.
Well, you also do organizational constellations, which is not something that a lot of people do on a consistent basis. So that must have really, you know, taken you.
I learned about organizational constellations is it's hard to get the body into an organization, right?
Yeah, right.
But what I learned is that, again, this idea of a palette is I can take bits and pieces of the work and I can do do it kind of not like a whole workshop, but do a little here, a little there, a little here, getting people up out of their chairs, getting them in contact with somatic knowledge and so again, it's like having this tool set or this paints that I can paint whatever picture needs to happen. And so there's lots of ways we can sneak things into organizations.
Yeah.
Without having to confront some of the taboos. So and that's one of the great things about the work.
Yeah. Do you have a feeling that organizational constellations are taking off in the United States? In Germany, they are a lot more accepted as coaching techniques and ways for businesses and organizations to find glitches in their systems. But I always felt that Americans are a bit more conservative in that way, that they don't.
I agree. I think there's a lot more resistance to anything that, there's the whole scientific approach to organizations here still quite entrenched, evidence-based. And so I think there is more resistance here, which means we have to be sneakier. It doesn't mean we're going to stop.
Yeah. How do you see constellations develop in the future? Do you have a vision there?
Well, like I say, I'm just sitting in one little corner of the world right now. It's hard to say. I think what I see is that we haven't, particularly in the United States, but we haven't got like a central, everybody agrees what things are, right? We have and so I see the work kind of getting more and more sort of dilute in a way, more adapted and changed. And I don't know that that's necessarily a bad thing. I mean, I don't know if it will hold as constellations. It may just sort of get woven into the fabric of lots of other things.
Yes.
At least here. I think in Europe it's smaller, more compact, more dense, more people know of certain kinds of who does what. I think that it may retain more of an identity there, but I think in places that are really large and diverse and diffuse like ours, that it might end up sort of morphing into lots of other things. Maybe that's a good thing. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think it's bad either, because we're dealing with a field of consciousness which is constantly changing. So how can it stay the same? And when you put a very rigid framework around it, then the whole thing can implode, because people will have creative ways of using this field of consciousness for whatever application they have. And if they're not allowed to, because there's a central committee that says, no, you have to do it this way, and this is the only way, then it's going to rot from the inside out. I've seen that with other energy modalities that had that proprietary aspect to them, where you had to get permission to do something different, and then it's at some point everybody gets unhappy and drops off. And so I'm very grateful to Bert that he never did that, that he never made it proprietary and top down. Very grateful.
That's true. It's been allowed to kind of morph into the forms it needs to.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Is there anything you would like to add?
I don't think so, other than it's delightful to talk to you, and I've enjoyed our conversation. And I appreciate what you're doing. I mean, I think, we have the saying in the constellation field, no roots, no wings. And so I appreciate that you're, at least for our area, trying to provide those roots so that we can use our wings.
Right. Well, so do you. You're definitely part of the root system. And thank you for organizing that first conference. It was really, really a turning point, a change for the whole field in North America. And then the conferences kept going on, and you birthed all of that all by yourself. And I know that was no small task.
There was not, I didn't sleep well. That's true.
No, No, I mean, it's still not easy to fill the conferences, but the first one, you know, and the field was so small back then, and to, you know, the whole financial thing and all of that, it was really incredible. And I loved some of the guests that you had there, the speakers. Dr. Joy DeGree Leary, I will never, ever forget her talk.
Yeah.
It just was heart-wrenching and very emotional for me to listen to her. But really, I mean, I learned so much from so many people there. So that was wonderful.
Yeah, I think I had some divine help on that one. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm glad to hear that. Yeah.
Well, Jane, thank you so much for making the time to talk for the origin story. And if we have your permission, we'd like to put your email and your website. That's going to be part of the NASC website. That's where the stories and the videos can be viewed. And then we have a timeline and all of that. And as I said before, we're going to be adding, as we go along, we add more pieces to the origin story. But thank you for being there from the beginning and everything that you have contributed.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.